Okay, so OpenAI just released AgentKit and Agent Builder, and in this video I'm going to give you a run through on how it works, how to access it and set it up, and then we'll run through both AgentKit and Agent Builder, all the features that you can access, and I'll show you a few examples of what you can build with this new tool. So the tools overall, we've got AgentKit, that's the developer toolkit for building agents that use logic tools and memory. Then we've got Agent Builder, that's the visual interface inside the OpenAI platform for building and testing workflows. So think of Agent Builder as similar to N8N, where you've got that visual workspace, you can drag and drop nodes and build out a workflow. AgentKit is that developer toolkit on the back end that powers the tools that we'll use throughout Agent Builder. So the goal with this new tool is to allow us to build structured multi-turn agents. So think custom GPTs on steroids, but for operational workflows. So again, it's similar to N8N, but a lot more powerful because we can now access apps and other tools within OpenAI and GPT-5 that will allow us to build really powerful workflows on this platform. Okay, so the first step is to access AgentKit and get set up on Agent Builder. To do that, you want to go to platform.openai.com/docs/overview. You'll then land on this page. You can see here OpenAI platform at the top, and then we can see here in the middle of the screen it says build with AgentKit, design and version workflows with Agent Builder, or use the Agents SDK for code level control. We want to click on that. That's going to then take us to the Agent Builder page. We can then see some information here about Agent Builder. So Agent Builder is a visual canvas for building multi-step agent workflows. You can start from templates, drag and drop nodes for each step in your workflow, provide typed inputs and outputs, preview runs using live data. When you're ready to deploy, embed the workflows into your site with ChatKit, or download the SDK code to run it yourself. Use this guide to learn the process and parts of building agents. So agents and workflows. To build useful agents, you create workflows for them. A workflow is a combination of agents, tools, and control flow logic. A workflow encapsulates all steps and actions involved in handling your tasks or powering your chats, with working code you can deploy when you're ready. So there's three main steps in building agents to handle tasks. Step 1, design a workflow in Agent Builder. This defines your agents and how they'll work. Step 2, publish your workflow. It's an object with an ID and versioning. And then step 3 is to deploy your workflow. So pass the ID into your ChatKit integration or download the Agents SDK code to deploy your workflow yourself. So step 1 is we want to design a workflow in Agent Builder. So to do that, we're going to click on Open Agent Builder here. That's then going to open up this canvas here that we can see. We've got Agent Builder on the screen, and then we've got a menu on the left-hand sidebar. So think of this as your workspace for creating AI agents. Everything you build happens right here on this canvas. Each block or node that we'll see as we build represents a step in your agent's logic. It could be processing input, reasoning about what to do next, calling a tool, or even producing an output. So the idea is that you can design a complete workflow visually without needing to write any code. So again, similar to N8N, where we can drag and drop nodes and build out our workflow here in a really easy no-code format. So our options are to start from a blank canvas, or we can use one of these pre-built templates that we can see on the screen. On the left-hand sidebar, you'll see some other areas of the OpenAI platform like chat, audio, images, assistants, and then we've got a manage section with some other things such as usage, API keys, logs. We don't need to use those for building here. They're separate to Agent Builder, but they're great if you want to prototype a specific skill or do some testing to see how the model handles something before writing it into an agent. So those are options that you can use. For now, we'll focus on Agent Builder. So I'll show you how the canvas works now. We'll look at how we can connect steps together and how you can run your first agent from start to finish. Okay, let's start by having a look at one of the pre-built templates. So we'll use data enrichment for this example. If we click on that, that's going to open up the Agent Builder canvas here, and we can see we've got a pre-built template. So we can see there's some nodes here in this workflow already, and we've also got some notes as well. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got options here that we can use to build our workflow. The first one is agent. So that's if you want to build an agent within your workflow, you would use this, and you can just drag that and drop it on the canvas to create a new one. As you can see in this example, we've got web research agent and summarize and display agent. So those are created from this node, and if I click on that, you can see it's got a name, instructions we can add, we've got a model that we can assign, reasoning effort, tools we can add, an output format, so we've got text JSON or a widget. We can change the verbosity, summary mode, and then some other features here regarding ChatKit and advanced. So that's how we would build an agent node within the workflow. We've then got end, so if we want to add an end node at the end of our workflow, we can drag and drop that. You then would just drag from the circle here to then connect it to the node that you want to connect it to. We've then got note, which you can see we've got some notes in this workflow already. So if I drag note onto the canvas, we can see here that creates a new sticky note where we can add text. You can also delete nodes, so obviously these three I've just added in as an example. If we see the rubbish bin icon up here, we can click that to delete the node. So we'll get rid of those. For the sticky notes, you just want to press delete on your keyboard. Next we have tools, and the tools we have access to are file search, guardrails, and MCP. I'll drag file search over to our canvas so we can have a look here. Essentially, this allows you to query a vector store for relevant information. So if you've got specific data in a vector database, you can assign that here via the vector store ID and then use this node as a tool to call on that database and that information for whatever task you're building. So if there's specific data that you need for a task, this is how you would use that and instruct your agent to be able to use and source this specific data for whatever task you're building. Next we have guardrails, so I'll drag that across and we'll open that up. Essentially, guardrails allows you to put some controls in place to limit risk or potential downsides that could occur. So this is an important one to use, especially if you're working within a business environment where PII is something that you need to keep hidden. That's something you can do here with guardrails. If we turn that on, we can see this would allow us to detect and redact personal identifiable information. We've then got moderation. This classifies and blocks harmful content. So if you want to make sure that no harmful content is getting through, if this is a customer or user-facing agent, for example, you might want to use this guardrail to block some of that content potentially getting through. We've then got jailbreak. This detects prompt injection and jailbreak attempts to keep the model on task. So if it's really specific and potentially at risk of any jailbreaks, that's something you can use as well. We've then got hallucination. So if we turn this on, that's going to detect potential hallucinations by validating string input against your knowledge source. And finally, we've got continue on error. So when enabled, this will allow you to define an error path if guardrails run into any runtime issues. So those are the guardrail options we've got. And again, depending on what your use case is, some of these might be relevant and important to use when building your agent. Finally, for the tools section, we've got MCP. So MCP is Model Context Protocol. This allows you to connect to an existing MCP if you want to call on specific tools within an app or a third-party platform. So this is a really powerful tool that we can use. Everything else within Agent Builder we are building within this OpenAI ecosystem, but the MCP tool allows us to access real-world tools and data sources outside of OpenAI. So things like APIs, databases, CRMs. We can connect to Gmail, Microsoft Teams, as you can see from the logo examples. And then we can bring that information back into the workflow or execute tasks that would then be executed via those platforms. So for example, imagine I've built an agent that monitors customer satisfaction survey responses. The agent can monitor those responses and then identify a low score. I could then have an agent in here that would summarize the feedback. And then you could use the MCP tool here to connect to Gmail MCP and automatically trigger an email to be sent at that point in the workflow to email the customer apologizing for their bad experience, offering a discount code, or offering to get in touch with support to speak to a customer service rep. So that's how we can use MCP if we want to trigger tasks on outside third-party platforms such as Gmail in that example. That's what makes Agent Builder really powerful. Next, we've got the logic section where we have the option to use logic-based steps in our workflow. Firstly, we have if-else, so that allows us to set rules based on conditions. So if this condition is met, do X, otherwise do Y. So as an example, sticking with our customer satisfaction survey example, if an agent analyzes a piece of text and detects negative sentiment, you could send it down a different path to trigger that workflow where the MCP would be activated and an email would be sent to the customer. If negative sentiment isn't detected, that would suggest that it's a positive review, so you could have a different branch and a different workflow for the positive reviews. Next, we have the while node. That allows us to essentially create a loop, so I keep going until you're done logic blocks. So if you want the agent to review many survey responses, that's where you could potentially use the while node and allow it to summarize the feedback. If you've got many responses it needs to go through, that would help it to be able to execute that task repeatedly until it gets through all of the responses. Next, we have the user approval node, and this is a really important one, especially if you're building complex workflows or workflows where there is PII or sensitive data or steps within the workflow. This is essentially human in the loop, so it allows you to set specific point in your workflow where human approval is required. So rather than executing the entire workflow automatically, whenever it gets to a user approval node, it will stop and ask for approval before continuing. So if there are any steps where you want this in place, so let's say, for example, you're building a content creation agent, but you want to review the content that the agent has created before publishing it. That's where you could use a user approval node. Therefore, before actually publishing the content on whatever platform you're publishing on, you can have this node there as a guardrail, essentially, where you would have to approve the content before it would then be published. So it would continue on the workflow after you've approved, or if you don't like the content it's created, you can reject and it won't publish the content. So that's where this node becomes really powerful if you need that human in the loop. And finally, we have data tools. So we have transform and set state. Transform allows us to transform data from one format to another within the workflow. So I'll just clean up this workspace here. We'll get rid of this node. We'll get rid of the MCP node and the guardrails one. We'll keep file search. So let's say for this example, we're using file search, which connects to our organization's vector store and retrieves the most relevant chunks of text-based data on a user's question or input. Now, when that file search node runs, the data is usually returned in a structured JSON object and includes things like retrieved text passages, metadata, and relevance scores. That's where we would then use the transform node. So what we can do is drag and drop that and use the circles here to connect the file search node to the transform node. And then we can set our rules on how we want that data to be transformed. So perhaps we want to use just the content from that vector retrieval, remove the metadata, or join multiple text segments together in one clean paragraph. That's where we can use transform here. So if we want to use that data in a more output-friendly way later on in our workflow, we can transform that data, that raw data from the vector file search, into clean, usable data via this transform node. Then we've got the set state node that allows us to set data in state within the workflow. So think of it as adding short-term memory to our agent. So to complete the workflow, we could then have an agent in this workflow. So that sort of brings it all together. So essentially what we have is, so file search finds the information from our vector database, transform then cleans it up and makes it into a more readable format, and then agent node can explain that and use it within its task that it executes at the end of the chain. So that's how it looks together in the full workflow using these three nodes. And then we've got the set state node. So this node allows us to essentially give our agent short-term memory. So it allows you to store data at any point in the workflow so you can reuse it later. For example, after transforming the results from a file search, we could then use the set state node to save that clean text as a variable called retrieved content. Then a few steps later, maybe when we're summarizing, generating a report, or sending an email, the agent can recall that same data without needing to fetch it again. So set state is what keeps your workflow efficient and context aware, allowing information to persist across multiple stages instead of getting lost between nodes. So for that example, we could remove that node and use set state here. So again, we've retrieved data from our file search, we've transformed that data, and now we want to set state so we can use that data later on. So that's how both of those data nodes work. Now let's just clean up our canvas here and then have a look at the example template workflow we've got. So as you can see, we've got notes and we've got 3 nodes in our workflow. We can see the overview here. Simple workflow to research a set of companies using web search and provide a summary analysis. Example input, analyze NVIDIA. We've then got the start node here. So every canvas, every project you start with will have a start node. We've then got the web research agent, and we can see the note above says find company information using web search. There's a bit more text here. Let's just expand this. Consider adding an MCP tool to hydrate in additional internal information. So that's a suggestion on how we could optimize this workflow, which is a pretty basic template workflow we're starting with. Next, we've got another note here that says summarize research for user using a ChatKit widget. That's related to this summarize and display agent here. And then we've got a final note that says alternatively convert the result to structured data and hydrate into an external system via MCP. So again, some suggestions here within this template on how we can further optimize and improve this template that we've been provided with. Okay, so now let's test the agent. So we can see up in the top right, we can see a preview button. If we click that, that's going to open preview mode here where we can see our workflow on the left hand side and then a chat interface on the right hand side. So let's say analyze Tesla as the prompt. That should start the agent, which we can see has executed successfully. The web research agent has then been called as that first step in the process. We can see it's researching Tesla, and we can see the information that's coming through, the website, information about the company. Then we can see the summarize and display agent has been called. So it's passed from web research through to summarize and display. We can see the raw data here, and then we can see it's been displayed in a more friendly readable format here. So we can see company name Tesla, industry automotive energy technology, headquarters Austin, Texas, company size, website, year founded, and then a description of the business. So there's a real working example of an agent built in Agent Builder. We can see that there's a web research agent which handles that step of researching based on the user input. The second step, the second node in the process is the summarize and display. So it takes that raw data that web research agent has found and then creates this table here and sends that to the user. So that's an example, a very basic example of how Agent Builder works and the kind of solutions you can build with this multi-step workflow. So I hope you enjoyed that introduction to Agent Builder. What I'm going to do is record some more videos with more advanced workflows that I'm going to build out. So if you're interested in seeing any of those, make sure you subscribe. If you've got any specific workflows or use cases in mind that you'd like to see built out, let me know in the comments below and I'll potentially make a future video building out that workflow within Agent Builder. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more and enjoy using Agent Builder.